The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be a world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your lips.
And then I just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought you were boxing.
All right, we are back with Mitch Salazar for a special bonus episode of the lineup this week following the completion of stop number 3 on the 2023 WSL Championship Tour, the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal, which was won by first-time CT winners, the rookie Caitlin Simmers and tour sophomore Zhao Xianca. We're going to run through winners and losers, the latest happenings on the 2023 Vissla CT Shaper rankings, and answer listener questions. We're super excited to get into it, but first, Mitch, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm great, Dave. I'm really excited after seeing what we saw at this event in Portugal. Obviously, the waves were pumping a few days. There was that one day where Callum Robson had the perfect 10, and I think every other wave that day was either, something in the excellent range or something in the low poor range. But, great event. Great to see some new faces up on the podium, but how about the dominance of Jack Robinson? He's going to move into Australia. And Molly Picklum, same thing, going back to her home country, both with the yellow leader jersey.
It's been a minute since the Australians have been on top, and I think you're right. I think for the last couple of decades, we've been like, is this it? Is this when we're going to see kind of a generational shift? And we don't want to get too far ahead of our skis yet, but it does feel like there is a ton of new blood filtering into the upper echelons of the rankings here. It's super excited, and let's open up with winners and losers. Mitch, why don't you tell or remind everybody how this segment works and start us off?
Yeah, so both you and I, Dave, are going to have 3 winners based off of the last event and 3 losers. I'm going to start with my first winner, and I think it's pretty obvious that the selection here has to go to Joao Xianca. Huge win, first win out of his CT career. He's only a sophomore, as you said, but 3 events into the season, and he's already had 2 semifinal finishes and a win. This is incredible. We're talking about a guy who barely qualified for the championship tour again last season. Remember going into Saquarema, his home break for the CS, he needed to get a good result there, made it to the semifinals. There was a really close heat in Khaliv. I think it was me, Monabrai. John Mel was in there as well, and he barely made it out of that heat. Luckily advanced, qualified through the last event in Khaliva. Next thing you know, semifinal finish at Pipeline, semifinal finish at Sunset Beach, and now a huge win against Jack Robinson. He moves up into number 2 in the rankings, Dave. Who's your number 1?
I love that pick, and he's part of this trend we're seeing now that the 2-tier systems moved into the 3-tier system, and we have the mid-season relegation. You've got elite level surfers having to battle their way back on, and we've seen it with Brissa Hennessy had to requalify through the Challenger Series, wins a CT event. Molly Picklum, same thing. Zhao Xianca, same thing. It's a little bit like the surfers who taste what it's like to be on the championship tour and lose it, come back with a vengeance. And I think we're going to see that trend continue. My first winner, you mentioned it already, is Callum Robson and Yeti. The first perfect 10 of the season for, as you pointed out, wrangling a mutant right-hander on Bloody Sunday at Super Tubos. The video, the photo angles, the thing was insane. And I know you and I talked about it on the day. The CT surfers have this WhatsApp group thread, and the thread went absolutely ballistic. Jack Robinson sent in a video of himself watching it live, and he is just screaming and howling through it happening. It's just so cool. Callum, he's a no-nonsense surfer. He's strong. He's fast. He charges. And it was on complete display in the elimination round in Portugal. And as a result of the perfect 10, he collects I think it's a 110-gallon Yeti Tundra cooler, which I'm sure he'll put to good use back in Australia. Yeah,
no, that's a great pick. And I think it's really exciting when we see the surfers actually supporting each other. And, we saw during the replay that everybody, in the athlete zone, the Red Bull athlete zone was cheering him on and actually hooting him into that wave too, because I think there was somebody paddling for the wave a bit further outside. They couldn't catch it, and they're like, go, Cal, go. And I remember Ryan Callanan, Connor Levy, even Samo Pupo was up there in the athlete zone too. And, I think the sophomore class is having a great year so far. Callum making it to the quarters, Joao Xianca winning, and Samuel Pupo also making it to the quarter. So you see that second generation of surfers coming through, and they're developing good results. And that brings me to actually my second winner of this event, not a sophomore, but a rookie. And she moves up to number 2 in the rankings. Her first CT win in just her third event, Dave. That's Caitlin Simmers from Oceanside, California. Loved her performance, loved her resilience. And when we speak about resilience, this 17-year-old has it. Remember, she gave up her spot in 2021, decided not to surf last season on the championship tour. This year, she comes back, maybe has a decent result at Pipeline, much better at Sunset Beach, but a win here after defeating Sophie McCulloch in the quarterfinals, literally in the last few seconds, comes back to win the final against Courtney Collog when Courtney opened up with a 9-point ride. Doesn't really get any better than this right now, and she's number 2 in the rankings, Dave. She could be qualifying for the Rip Curl WSL finals, too.
I love it. And you mentioned she's from Oceanside, San Diego. I wonder who was the last San Diegan to win a CT event? Was it
Taylor Knox,
Rob Machado? Like for a county that produces such good surfers and has such good waves, it is shocking that it's been that long between sips. But yeah, good for Katie. I love that pick. You know, the second winner I got is a little bit broad, but like the Portuguese fans and surfing in general. You know, I've had the good fortune to work at that event for many years, and the fans, they always turn out for the world's best surfers. But even I was shocked when, you know, the national media reported that 51,000 people were on the beach for the big bad day on Sunday, which is really wild. So yeah, I think, you know, the winners for turning up en masse are the Portuguese fans, and I think our surfers are too, because they get to perform in front of such a huge crowd.
Dude, you mentioned it all right there, Dave. I mean, 51,000 people, that's maybe, you know, just as close as the U.S. Open on its busiest day too. And we're talking about maybe a beach that doesn't even have the same size as Huntington. So good for them, good for the Portuguese fan, and good for Europe. I know they're gunning for another CT event soon, so that just might open the doors for it right there. And the president was there on finals day too. It was amazing.
Right. El Presidente. I loved it.
So great things. Portuguese fans, European fans, they loved it. But my number 3 winner, and she needed a huge result, Dave, our runner-up to the event, Courtney Collog. She moves up to number 12 in the rankings. Was really close to winning this event. I thought she should have closed it out after her opening 9-point ride in the first few minutes. Unfortunately for her, it didn't happen, but still, you got to take the positive when you get it. She moves up to number 12, right below the cut line, but she's right there going into Bells Beach, an event she's won before, and Margaret River, another event that is very strong for her. I see Courtney doing well, especially if there's a lot of swell, both in WA and a Bells.
I love that. And it's so cool to see Courtney, as you pointed out, like respond after a slow start in Hawaii. I had the good fortune of talking to her on the sand before the season started. She looked as strong as I've ever seen her. She seemed so clear-minded. She'd spent a month in Nicaragua dialing her surfing in. And yeah, the results just didn't happen in Hawaii. It was awesome to see her rebound. And as you pointed out, she's got a strong reputation at both of the Australian events. It'll be interesting to see. My third winner coming out of the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal is Team Volcom. You know, between Jack Robinson, Zhao Xianca, and Iago Dora, the Volcom Stone, they have 3 surfers in the top 10 on the men's championship tour, which, in my opinion, is really remarkable and a remarkable achievement for, you know, a surf program that, like many others over the last decade, has gone through quite the upheaval. And as of today, they're the number 1 surf team on the men's tour in terms of the top 10. And I think, you know, the likes of Brad Doherty and Matt Bemrose and their teams, they deserve a lot of credit in what they've built on the men's side. And as we know, they have Sierra Kerr coming down the track on the women's qualification side as well. So yeah, Team Volcom is taking the number 3 winner spot for me coming out of Portugal.
That is an excellent pick. I hadn't even really thought about it. I know that Iago, Jack, and Joao, you know, they're big representatives of the brand. But when it comes to a whole, Volcom had really been seen as a free surfing brand for most of the time too. I mean, besides Bruce Irons, they hadn't really had a representative on the championship tour for many years. So good for them. Big credit to both Dave Riddle and Jason Shibata for what they've done over there in Hawaii too over the years. They developed the likes of Ezekiel Lau and Imai Kalani DeVault as well. Now both of them riding for different brands, but I think they deserve a lot of credit. Now going to the loser segment, Dave. This is an interesting one because to me, given the conditions that we had at this event, I thought these four surfers were going to do better. I like to call them the Fantastic Four. It's Gabe, John, Felipe, and Italo. Out of those four men that I mentioned, all four of them have been past world champions. One of them is coming off of their last world championship last year, or their first world championship for that matter. None of them made the quarterfinals here. That is a result that I would say is lackluster for them, given the conditions, given the amount of experience that they all have here, and given that all of them have been former champions at this event too. So to me, this is something that I did not expect. I was expecting them to go into finals day, at least into the quarters, but none of them even made it there. So they are my first loser.
You and I are mind melding on this one because similarly, my first loser was the champion class. You know, Kelly Slater, Stephanie Gilmore, Felipe Toledo, Tyler Wright, John Florence, Carissa Moore, Gabriel Medina, and Italo Ferreira were all bundled out of the event, as you pointed out, before the quarterfinals. Not a single world champion on tour out of the 8 that we currently have made it to the quarters. I'm not sure when the last time that happened was. Like, really shocking, and maybe not proof positive, but maybe one of the strands leading to what we mentioned in the upfront, that it might feel like there is a generational shift happening on tour this season. Anything can happen. The talent across the board is so strong, and to see something like this happen, I was impressed in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's almost shocking to me that we're still talking about surfers that have been here for, 3 decades, like Kelly, still expecting him to get good results. But it's based off of the previous results that he's had at this location, and especially knowing what the forecast was going to be, we expected them to do well. But I agree, Stephanie Gilmore, she's below the cut line. I wouldn't even be surprised to see her really up the ante in her home country of Australia, but it's a losing class right here. We had it at the male Rip Pro Portugal, and I was a little devastated when I saw the results going into finals day. Not a single former champion out there, which is good though. It's good for surfing.
Totally.
So now my number 2 pick, and this might come to a little bit of a surprise, Dave, but I had a hard thought about it, and to me, it's the European surfers, because maybe a lot of people wouldn't necessarily consider them the heaviest hitters on tour, but given the results that Leo has had this year, both at Pipeline and at Sunset Beach, I was expecting him to do a lot better. I was expecting Maxime Housineau to get his best result out of the season here. That did not happen. Even though Joan Duru got an equal 9th place, this is not a surfer that is currently on the championship tour, so this doesn't really count. And in terms of the female surfers, Yolanda Hopkins did show up, but once again, wild card surfer that made it all the way through to the quarterfinals, eliminating Carissa Moore. So those European men on the championship tour side did not have a good result going into this event, knowing that it's the only stop out of this leg. And now their back is up against the wall going in Australia. Given that Leo already has the final finish and a good result at Sunset Beach afterwards, he might be guaranteed a spot before the mid-year cutoff, but not for the other 2 gentlemen that I mentioned. Maxime Housineau is in a lot of trouble, Dave.
It's an interesting one, and just broadly with European surfers too. Like, we've had the good fortune of spending time there. There are so many good surfers. There's such a strong community. There's a very healthy industry there supporting young surfers on both the men's and women's side. I have to wonder too if it's a function of just it's very far to travel globally to kind of develop that elite level and en masse. Like everyone you mentioned for sure is an elite level surfer, but we're not seeing the same kind of community group out of, Hawaii or Australia or Brazil that we're seeing for the Europeans. And, similar to South Africa, amazing country, great waves, world-class surfers. It's just very far away to get to the United States or Hawaii or Indonesia or Australia or Brazil. I have to wonder if that plays something in that result. But great pick, great surfers from that continent. I'd love to see them do well. My second loser, big drum roll, is the surfing industrial complex. So, okay, everyone listening can drink now. I've said it. But yeah, the surfing industrial complex, of which, the IPS, the ASP, the WSL, and myself would be considered a part of, or at least complicit in. But what I mean by that is Kolohe Andino, absolutely not a loser. He is a fantastic surfer. He's had a very healthy career amongst the world's best. However, more so than anyone, we could argue that he is the person the industry essentially raised, right? He's been in the limelight since he's very young, sponsored from a very young age, early calls and expectations of he is destined to be a world champion, lofty aspirations, a lot of investment. And yet, as you mentioned, he's currently ranked 31st on the CT after Portugal. He's yet to clinch his first CT win in over 100 events surfed. He's made a few notable finals. And we don't know where he goes from here. Whether he performs and gets his results at Bells and Margaret River, where he's finaled before in the past and makes the cut. Or if he doesn't, does he go to the Challenger Series to try to qualify? Does he sail off into the San Clemente sunset? And whatever the case, right? The results have yet to match the signaled expectations from the surfing world. And this is something we've talked about on the podcast before with Julian Wilson, really talented surfers that have really impressive careers on paper, but then matched against kind of that long shadow that we all collectively put out there for them, they fall short. And so for that reason alone, I think we, the surfing industrial complex, all have to kind of take a collective L on this one too.
Well, you want to take responsibility, and what happens here, I think Kolohe's story is an interesting one because he grew up in the limelight, ever since Dino retired. Dino became the team manager for Oakley. Kolohe was able to go on all these trips with Oakley, then eventually got sponsored by Billabong. He turns into the American Wonder Kid, wins all these QS events. When we were amateurs, Dave, he was winning everything. I mean, there wasn't a single event that he wasn't winning.
Everything.
And it was scary. You'd be thinking, okay, this guy's going to win a championship tour event. First year he's on. He's going to win a world title within his first 3 years. Next thing you know.
Oh, the hype video from Nike before his rookie year was like, dude, I've never seen anything like this. Everyone's like, he's doing 8-foot airs at Salt Creek. And we're like wearing white wetsuits. I'm like, I guess this is the new Kelly. We're here. Let's go.
And that was basically their goal, was to get a new hopeful for the United States of America on top of the world stage. And unfortunately, in his 12-year career on the championship tour, that hasn't happened. As you mentioned, the goal right now is just to requalify. You have 2 events to get at least 2 quarterfinal finishes. I would have to say probably better than that, though. At least 2 semis, maybe even a final. But he just needs to focus on the 2 events that he has ahead. And if it doesn't happen, then, hey, you regroup. And if you don't want to do this anymore, you just take a step away and you enjoy life as a free surfer.
For sure. And 2 events, let's just be honest, Winky Pop, Bells Beach, Main Break, Margaret River, the box, wherever the venues are for these last 2 events, that if we're being objective and we look at how well he surfs and how strong he is and when he's on, there's no reason he cannot win both of those and perform, right? And that's kind of the weird question with it is where is the disconnect? He's been injured in the past. He seems completely healthy now. His boards look good. His surfing looks good when it's on. And it's just, man, we just need to see that spark. I hope we see it over the Australian leg. But third loser coming out of Portugal for you, Mitch?
Yeah, I have Tyler Wright. She's sitting number 4 in the rankings, but I thought this was a great event for her in terms of the conditions. She's won in France before. She's won at Pipeline, heavy waves like Fiji, Honolulu Bay. I expected her to do very well here. Ends up losing in the elimination round. And not to say, that she's out of the title race or anything like that, but when you're number 4, given that you could have been number 1 going into your home country of Australia when you've won at Bells Beach, you're coming off of a win last year. Margaret River's a good stop for you too. I kind of thought this was the kind of season that she was going to have in terms of consistency. But after Sunset, I kind of saw that spark decrease a little bit. It seems like she's maybe overthinking things a little bit. I didn't see that at Pipeline. It seems like she was reacting to things at Pipeline, which is something that I like to see out of Tyler. She's letting the ocean dictate what she's going to do and not control her own actions. So, I don't necessarily think that she's going to be out of the title race, especially going into the latter part of the year when we have Tahiti on the schedule now too. But in terms of this event, after Portugal, she's my 3rd biggest loser, Dave. What about yourself?
It's an interesting pick, right? Because we've had 2 Rip Curl WSL finals over the last couple of years. Tyler has not participated in either. And she's actually had pretty strong starts to both seasons and then kind of fallen off mid-year and was unable to claw her way back into the final 5 to be in the mix at lower trestles. So it's an interesting pick, and it'll be interesting to see if she can kind of rectify the trend from the last 2 years. My third loser coming out of Portugal, and I'm going to go with somewhat of an obvious one, but hopefully for less than obvious reasons. And that is anyone at the bottom of the rankings on either side at this stage. And I'm sure people are rolling their eyes so hard right now. I actually hear it happening in the future from here. But here's my point. You know, the championship tour, it's home to the best men's and women's surfers on the planet. And as we've seen, anything can happen at any time. So typically, with 2 events remaining in Bells Beach and Margaret River before relegation and 20,000 potential points still up for grabs, you can normally go about your business thinking that there's still freedom of movement in the rankings. And yes, there is. But after the first 3 events, the middle of the rankings, just under and just over the cut line, is absolutely clogged with a murderer's row of proven performers. On the men's side, you're looking at Jordy Smith, Nat Young, Connor O'Leary, Kanoa Igarashi, Kelly Slater, Baron Mamiya, and the like, all hovering around the relegation point. And on the women's side, you've got Betty Lusakura Johnson, Sally Fitzgibbons, Courtney Conlog, Lakey Peterson, and Steph Gilmore, amongst the others, in the mix at that stage of the rankings. And so, you know, my point is, if you need to make up ground in the rankings right now, you have to do so through a really daunting field at the moment, and that's going to be something to watch heading into Australia.
Yeah, it's intimidating knowing that some people that have been runner-ups for the World Championship are in the mix of not requalifying. People that have been former world champions are in the mix of not requalifying. And remember, did you see that video of Kelly saying, "Hey, this might be my last time ever in Portugal. This might be my last time ever"? I don't know. He might be speculating, but that's another thing too.
Captain Smokescreen. We'll call it like.
But
everyone's gonna be warming up for Bells, being like, "I can't believe Kelly said that in the video," and then they're gonna miss a set wave and be like, "God damn
and
it!"
that's what I'm
that's
saying.
Exactly what he wants.
Exactly. He's gonna get a result. Next thing you know, he's requalifying. He goes into the surf ranch. He's gonna be a top 10 surfer after that. So there's all these speculations and stuff that we can be saying, but I don't think we won't be able to notice their body language up until the actual moment when they realize, okay, it's now or never. And some people don't have the same kind of support that others do in the top part of the rankings too. Okay, financial decision-wise, I either make the cut or I'm maybe not even doing the Challenger Series afterwards because I don't have enough financial support. It's like that, Dave.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting, and I can't wait to see what happens in Australia. Before we go into the first break, we should bring up the Lineup Podcast has its own fantasy league, WSL Fantasy Surf Game. The league is a private league. It's called the Lineup Podcast. So if you search for it, the password is lineup, all lowercase. I try to play fantasy every event. Constant criticism from the people in my life is that I should do much better than I do. I can't get it done. But Mitch, what's been your fantasy experience like over the course of the season so far? How'd you go in Portugal?
I'm so embarrassed, Dave. I forgot to actually set my team before the event started. So I didn't gain any points after this event, and I'm already
not great.
I'm in one league. It's with all the guys from Florence Marina X, IPD Surf, and the guys that I used to work with at Hurley, and the crap that goes down in terms of the talking right there. I'm in last place
yes,
now.
Of course.
I'm in last place, and they're like, "Hey, this is your job. Like, why aren't you better at this?" I'm like, first of all, I forgot to set my team.
Yeah.
So I'm embarrassed. I'll do better. Going into the next few events, I promise.
I've got a question for you though. When you do remember to set your team, are you one of those people that you set your team and then obviously through the first round you can be like, okay, I'm going to swap things out, or do you just set it and forget it and die on whatever hill you've set up on.
No, because especially now, because the seating changes, that we have a bracket stage rather than an actual round of 32. The way people match up against each other might be a little sooner than expected. So I definitely am watching things going into the elimination round. As soon as the elimination round finishes, if we're now going into the actual bracket stage, which would now be the round of 32, I'm changing my team up as quickly as I can before they actually match up. I don't want any friendly fire.
I like it. Well, I did remember to set my team. I don't think I've ever changed surfers mid-event, though, because I usually am busy, and I'm one extra thing that if I put it in my brain, I'll probably forget how to drink water or something, so I don't bother with it. But I was shocked. I opened the Lineup Podcast League, which has a few hundred teams in it, so hello to everyone. And I'm ranked 70th, which is maybe the best I've ever done. But we should shout out the current top 5. In 5th at the moment in the Lineup Podcast Fantasy League is Team Goofyfoot Barner. In 4th is Yard Panther. In 3rd is Lemus. In 2nd is Don V, who looks like their avatar is the top of Kelly's bald head. And number 1 in the Lineup Podcast Fantasy League following the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal is Team Andy Oppo. So congratulations to you guys. Again, if you're a listener and you want to get involved, it is a private league at worldsurfleague.com/fantasy. You just look for the Lineup Podcast League and punch in the password lineup, all lowercase. A lot of fun. Good opening segment, Mitch. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. It is now time for the post-Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal update of the Vissla CT Shaper rankings.
Shaper ranking!
A reminder of how this works. Shapers are given points based on the performance of surfers that are on their boards that finish in the quarterfinals or better. It's combined rankings, men's and women's, so the higher they place, the more points the shaper receives. We're going to be tracking the Vissla CT Shaper rankings from event number 1 at Pipeline through event number 10 at Chopu, and we will crown a winner before September's Rip Curl WSL finals. Now, when the dust had settled in Portugal, we saw Marcio Zuvi and the Sharp Eye team wrench back the number 1 spot on the Vissla CT Shaper rankings from Matt Biolis and Team Mayhem, who took it after the Hurley Pro at Sunset Beach. As far as the Sharp Eye team went, it was a staggering showing across the men's and women's events. They had a men's runner-up and 2 men's quarterfinal finishes, combined with 2 women's semifinal finishes, claiming 5 out of the 8 possible results from Portugal. It's the biggest performance from a single team we've seen so far this season. Mitch, what were your thoughts on the Shaper performances in Portugal and specifically how Sharp Eye did in taking back the lead from Channel Islands? From Mayhem.
Yeah, well, I mean, props to them because they've been dominating for the last few years, and it's much more noticeable now, especially with Jack Robinson in another final here in Portugal. But big props to the 2 local shapers from California, too, getting both of their women into the final. Chris Borst from Oceanside, California, and Tim Stamps from Huntington Beach. It goes to show you that you don't necessarily need to be on the biggest brand in terms of the actual board and the shaper to get a result. I think you're guaranteed good surfing when you're getting on one of those boards if you're an elite level surfer, Dave. But this is just a demonstration of what an actual relationship with your shaper on an intimate side can develop into a transition into a championship tour status surfer. And we're seeing it with both Courtney Conlog and Chris Borst. Caitlin Simmers and Chris Borst, and Courtney Conlog with Tim Stamps. I like it. I also want to give a big prop to Glenn Pang from TNC. Sally Fitzgibbons also made the quarterfinals on the women's side, so he got some points on the board as well.
For sure. And it's the Vissla CT Shaper rankings program has been so cool to see. You know, the commentators talk about it on the broadcast. We get to talk about on the podcast. The social media community is jumping in, and the shapers themselves are really getting involved. I got an Instagram message the other day from the shaping team at 1DA who build Jadson's boards, and they're awarding prizes for perfect 10s coming out of the event. And they wanted to let us know because it's all part of the same kind of conversation about, the best shapers on the planet building craft for the best surfers on the planet. And on that topic, I made a few other notes from the event. We mentioned it already, but so cool for Callum to get the first perfect 10 of the season. He was riding a Glen Pang from TNC Surf that he pulled from Hawaii. It was on the big day during the elimination round. And then he went on to collect the first points of the year on Sparrow, which is his sort of standard shaper with his semifinal finish. Very, very cool. And like you said, he might be the only surfer on the Sparrow team on tour at the moment, but it doesn't mean that you can't collect points. It doesn't mean that you can't move into the conversation.
And I want to mention something too about Callum that I think is really exceptional. You asked me a few episodes ago, Dave, what was my quiver like when I was doing the QS and traveling? I had a low income, I wasn't able to make enough money to support myself to eventually pursue the highest of the upper echelon. I'm talking about which were formerly known as the 6-star primes, now known as the Challenger Series events. Once I made it there, I had to make a financial decision whether or not it was better to go to college and pursue something else within the sport of surfing than continue to be a professional surfer. Props to Callum, man. It goes to show you, he's still riding his local shaper, a guy that's probably shaped his boards for a long time, goes to Hawaii, grabs the boards from a local shaper over there. He probably has to pay for them, and because he has to pay for them, he appreciates them to the largest of severities because, look, he goes to Portugal, brings a board that was actually designed for Hawaii to Europe, rides it, gets a perfect 10 on that board, and then goes back to his normal shortboards afterwards. This is a sign of resiliency, and to everybody that's listening, this guy still does not have a main sponsor on his board.
It's a great note. And I loved what you said about the local shaper component from Hawaii. I remember the last time we caught up, we were like, are we going to see the same thing happen in Portugal? And we were a little bit unsure, but we did actually see a local shaper based in Peniche, originally from Germany, with Fatum surfboards. They put points on the board following Yolanda Hopkins's quarterfinal finish. So I thought that was really cool. And, as we said, like the European surfing community is so strong. There's elite level talent, whether it's coaches, surfers, shapers, and it's cool to see that validated on the elite field. I did not see that coming at all. What about you, Mitch?
No, I remember you sent me that text the other day, and I was so stoked. I was like, wait, a German guy that lives in Portugal now, and he's a shaper, and he's a Yolanda shaper? Because I've seen her for a few years now, and I didn't even realize that was the case. So great for them. It goes to show you that
we should real quick. I had to look it up. We should call out the shaper's name. It's Yero Tragaching, and I definitely pronounced that wrong. But congrats to you guys. Like, that's so cool. But sorry, Mitch, you finished your point. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I appreciate that because props to him. You come from a non-surfing country, you go to a big surfing country like Portugal. Expectations for yourself are usually high. Maybe for the people around you, they're not as high. But once you start developing boards and somebody gets a good result on them in terms of competition, people are like, okay, this guy that maybe doesn't come from an original surfing background can actually make a great board. Why don't I try one? Next thing you know, that person's riding it on the QS. They might make it even on to the CT eventually too. So I love these stories. That's what we're here about. That's what surfing's all about.
Couple other odds and ends before we round out this episode's Vissla CT Shaper Ranking segment. Sammy Pupo, whose brother Miguel Pupo on tour. Their father was a touring surfer and is a world-class shaper in his own right. Both the boys have ridden OHP boards in the past. Miguel, over the last couple of seasons, has been part of that juggernaut Sharp-Eye team. Before Portugal happened, we saw his brother Sammy Pupo riding Sharp-Eyes, warming up on the Belgish side of the peninsula in Portugal. He ended up riding those to his best result of the season, the quarterfinals. What do you think about the move for Sammy there, Mitch?
It's an interesting one, Dave, because we talked about it during the opening part of the season at Pipeline that, he was sticking to his father's designs, and it just seemed like after Sunset Beach, when he didn't get the result that he was kind of expecting there, especially coming off of a Rookie of the Year performance last season, he knows that he's a top 10 surfer when it comes to competing. Talent-wise, I would have to say he's very comparable to Joao Chianca, who is currently number 2 in the ranks. I don't think it's a bad move. The one thing I will say, though, is that you're going up against a lot of great surfers within your own surfboard team that might have highlighted performances that are better than yours. And that could also come with free surfs, such as Jack Robinson, such as your older brother Miguel, and obviously Kano Igarashi being a juggernaut on the team too. So he might not get the most media attention, but that could also be a positive thing for him. Take away a little bit of the limelight when it comes to the actual industry side. That could cement his position on the CT for years to come, Dave.
It's interesting, Mitch. I wanted to ask you another question about this too, because you were a touring competitor as well. Obviously, you've mentioned a few times you didn't have the same financial support that a lot of the other traveling surfers did in terms of getting equipment. But I am curious if you noticed when you toured, was there a little bit of a lemming culture, right? Where it's like everyone's like, that person keeps winning on those boards, I need to get on those boards. And this kind of gravitational pull towards one place because everyone's like, that shaper's got the hot hand right now, I have to get on those boards. And it's a little bit like what's the phrase, like it's a little bit like it's not foregone conclusion, but I'll figure it out later. But it's a little bit like, I got it, self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm like, Book of Revelations, what am I thinking? No, it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like if one surfer's doing well on a board brand and everyone's like, I got to get on that brand, and that brand gets even more people on it, then the results are constantly going to be higher. And so again, it reinforces the belief. I'm wondering if you noticed that when you were touring as well, or if this is sort of a newer phenomenon.
No, it's been around for a while. I would have to say during my time doing the QS, I was a big Channel Islands guy originally, and not to say that I'm not at the moment because I still ride a few of their boards. But when I saw, Kolohe and a lot of people having a lot of success with Mayhems, especially a guy that was around the same age group as myself, Ian Crane. I remember him and I used to do the QS a lot together within the same region. I decided to try Mayhems out, and next thing you know, I'm surfing very well on these boards. I've been dedicated to them for a long time now because I feel that my surfing has progressed so much, and they're very responsive. That happened a lot with a lot of surfers within the North American region. I felt like Mayhem dominated for a while after kind of the downfall of Channel Islands, and now they're uprising again. They're coming back up, especially with Joel's performances lately. But I think what I saw with Sharp Eye was probably around 2015, 2016. One thing that changed to me was when they signed Felipe to a full contract. And since they're based in San Diego, a lot of these local surfers, I remember the Thompson brothers from Jacksonville Beach in Florida, they used to come out to Lower Trestles and train during the whole summer. A lot of people will see them at Lowers. Next thing you know, Jet Schilling's on the boards. He's a full-time rider too. And it just creates a sense of confidence. And especially when you're on the qualifying series and you're surfing many different heats against many different people from different regions of the world, you need to be at your very best to perform in those 20 minutes that you have inside the water. So to me, it's something that I've seen for a while. I think it's going to continue to happen too. I wouldn't even be surprised to see some more changes before the year ends.
Well, you mentioned Channel Islands, and I had to look this up. Zhao Xianca delivered Channel Islands their first championship tour win since Lakey Peterson at Surf Ranch in 2019. And I find that amazing in so many ways. But as we've talked to Britt Merrick, who leads that team, and Brent Powers, who's the team manager there, Britt's the lead shaper, have talked about in the past, over the last few years, they've been in rebuild mode. Through the mid-aughties and early 2010s, they were so dominant. Bobby Martinez, Dane Reynolds, Kelly Slater, Lisa Anderson, Rob Machado. It was this crazy team that wasn't sustained. Nothing lasts forever. They had a bit of a falling off, and now they're building back up. So yeah, I think Britt and Brent, what they've been able to do over the last few years, especially in the face of these mega teams at Sharp Eye, Mayhem, DHD, the success of Paizel, to build a program that is already delivering a CT result after a fallow period is really cool.
100%. And there were three other families that were involved during that process with Channel Islands when I felt that they were at the top. One was Taylor Knox, who had his own model with Channel Islands. The Malloy brothers, who had their own models, but they tended to ride flyers for the most part because they were usually those power surfers that really like to engage the rail. And the Curran brothers, both Timmy and Nathaniel were on the championship tour riding Channel Islands. And I felt that for a while, not only were they super dominant, but because of the accessibility of being in the LA region, or at least in Southern California, they were able to disperse their boards a lot better throughout the entire community here in North America, especially from Mexico, where I'm from. We'd see them a lot. Next thing you know, Sharp Eye having a lot of sales reps over the world, and they're spreading these boards around. And I think that's what's starting to happen with Channel Islands again. They got a Brazilian surfer, and guess what? This Brazilian surfer is now in the top 2 out of the championship tour, so this should help them.
For sure. The last little note I mentioned, and you brought this up, in the days following the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal, but, Hawaiian CT surfer Seth Moniz really gracefully announced that he's moving on from longtime shaper Takoro, heading into the Australian leg. Just going to have a quick look at where Seth is at on the rankings right now. He's 13th. Right? So he's had 9th place at Pipe, a 9th place at Sunset Beach, and a 9th place in Portugal. What do you think about this decision, Mitch? And if you had to speculate, where do you think he could kind of land when we find out here?
I think it's kind of an obvious place where he's going to land. I don't even need to say the name because they've been the most dominant for a few years now. But
really?
I think so because if you look at the success that a lot of people have had, especially including last year's world champ, I think that's where Seth is going to end. It was a bittersweet farewell, though. I know him and Wade are super tight. His brother Josh also rides Kerry Takoro's boards, Wade's brother.
Right.
Although they're from HIC, they're still a Takoro brand board.
Of course.
And Wade is such an incredible person, a great surfer, by the way. I mean, I would say if we actually had the Surfers Cup, he might end up winning.
There's a few shapers calling for it.
Yeah.
I'd love to figure out how we do this. Yeah.
But it's bittersweet. It's a decision that came down to him whether or not he wanted to perform at an upper level. And if it's a mental thing too, then go ahead and do it. There's nothing holding you back, especially if that person that you consider a dear friend of yours is letting you go as well. So if there's not going to be any hard feelings, I think it's a smart decision on Seth's behalf.
Interesting. Well, the current Vissla CT Shaper rankings following the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal are in the number 1 spot, Sharp Eye, number 2, Mayhem, number 3, DHD, number 4, Channel Islands, and number 5, Pizel. We'll see what happens at April's Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. But that was it for this week's Vissla CT Shaper rankings update. We're going to take another quick break, and we will be right back.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is The Lineup. I'm Mitch, that's Dave, and we're going into one of our favorite segments out of the entire podcast. It's our Instagram fan questions. Remember, you can follow us at The Lineup Pod, and you can send us questions via DMs anytime you would want. Dave, let's get into our first question from @Stacy12. This is a fun question because it has to do with our last segment, the Vissla CT Shaper rankings. Which shaper do you think will have the best win percentage throughout the season?
That is a good question. And I think it's a good question because there's probably a couple ways you can take it. And we've just spent a lot of time talking about how Sharp Eye has sort of wrenched the lead away from Mayhem following the completion of the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal. They have a solid team for a good reason. They've got the hot hand on tour right now. So I think, probability-wise across the tour, you'd say they certainly have an advantage, and also just performance-wise across the first few events, we've seen that they're delivering the results. But maybe there's a different way to look at win percentage, because this has come up since we launched the Vissla CT Shaper rankings, and something we can kind of take a look at moving forward. Is there a way to create a win percentage related to the amount of surfers a shaper has on their team, right? We've talked about in the past, there's really kind of 3 tiers to the Vissla CT Shaper rankings. There's the first tier that's got your Sharp Eyes and Mayhems and Channel Islands and DHDs that have 6, 7, 8, 11 surfers on their program. There's a secondary tier where you've got shapers like Pizel or TNC Surf that might have a couple of surfers, 2 to 3. And then you've got kind of the third tier, which are just shapers that have their one surfer. Your Smith shapes with Jordy Smith, your Sparrow shapes with Callum Robson, your Pattersons with Carlos was on tour, Pattersons with Italo Ferreira, generally speaking. So it's an interesting thing. What we don't want to do with the Vissla CT Shaper rankings is ignore that there are teams that are investing a lot of money. There are teams that have the potential to invest a lot of money. And so if we just counted like one surfer per team or two surfers per team, it kind of discounts the reality, right? Which is that Sharp Eye and Mayhem and DH and Channel Islands have attracted and are supporting a pretty big amount of team riders at this point. But at the same time, it'd be interesting. I think just taking a quick look at the rankings, you've got Sharp Eye up front, Mayhem in second, DHD in third, Channel Islands in fourth, and Paizel in fifth. If you look at kind of where DH and Paizel are at the moment, they don't have a ton of people on tour, but they're still in the mix. And that kind of speaks, I think, to the potency of the people they do have on the team at the moment. But, Mitch, what do you think about in terms of the question?
I have a proposition for you when it comes to this, Dave, because I feel that the most just way of doing this has to be after the mid-year cut. So we have a reduced amount of surfers. We have a reduced amount of surfers on certain shapes. And secondly, these results have to count after the round of 16 as well. So same thing applies from the Vissla CT Shaper rankings to this question right here. I think it has to be quarterfinals forward, and I think it has to be after the mid-year cut. What do you think?
I thought you were going to go the other way. I thought you were going to say, since there's less surfers on tour, we should only count semifinals and better.
Damn.
And I know there's two different schools of thought here, but I like it. I mean, what I think the important thing that listeners should understand too, like when we built the rankings for this year, we talked to every shaper we could. We talked to surfers, a lot of our colleagues that are big surf brains as well. We talked to Vissla. We really like where it's at right now, but we're certainly open to evolving it moving forward. I have a little bit of hesitation of changing the rules mid-flight, but we can always take it up the hill to the Council of Elders, and by that I mean the shapers, to see what they think. They're never short of opinion, and check it out. But interesting proposition, Mitch.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to do that for 2024, because this year we got to get things dialed down first, and then afterwards we'll get into it. Here's question number 2, Dave. Big shout out to @WillyGoat0230. He's sent in a couple of questions. We appreciate you, @WillyGoat0230. I'm going to just say it the way he spelt it. How do yas see the season's rookie group pairing, and who are your standouts so far?
It's a good question, and I kind of hear that as like faring as compared to years past, and it's interesting. I think something I've observed is, and this is not a perfect science or formula, but like every 5 or so years on the men's CT, you kind of see a cycle of generational talent shift or talent moving forward. And that's not to say they're winning world titles, but they're kind of up there in the mix. They're at the vanguard of what the world's best surfing looks like. And oftentimes for a variety of factors, socioeconomic, just general kind of physiology and, performance measurement, it seems like every 5 years you see it. Now, it's not on the button, of course. And then on the women's side, I actually think it's a bigger window. Yeah. It's probably closer to 10 years. Like we see like a decade-long class of surfers, and then that starts to shift. And so I bring that up because I think that informs kind of how you view rookie classes. Like you might be a great rookie, but you might be falling right in the middle of this sort of performance dynasty on tour. And it's like, I couldn't crack through the ceiling. Or you could kind of hit right at the right moment. And it's not luck, of course. Like the surfer actually has to surf, and they're the ones that are pushing kind of the performance boundaries themselves. But so much of it is timing. If you're taking a look at the rankings right now, like we just saw Caitlin Simmers, she's a rookie. She won the CT in Portugal. She's currently tied for second on the rankings. And then even Australia's Sophie McCulloch, who was injured for the first 2 events, but performed really, really well in Portugal. She collected a quarterfinals finish. And I would say, too, just as we've been talking, you got sophomore Molly Picklum, you got sophomore Gabby Bryant. You have young surfers on the women's tour kind of turning the clock around in a way. And it's interesting. And they might be right around that kind of 10-year inflection point. On the men's side, it's interesting. It's similar. You see some young surfers up there, but as far as rookies go in 2023, you've got Rio Waida. He's currently ranked number 10th. First surfer ever from Indonesia to make the championship tour, and it's really been cool to see his surfing translate to the CT. My guy, he's another sponsorless surfer, dark horse for Rookie of the Year, but Ian Gentile, I think, has been surfing fantastic. He looks like the calmest dude at the event, and I think that speaks to he competed so much when he was younger. He was heralded as, Andy Irons called him the best 12-year-old on the planet. So much attention. Even though he's a rookie, man, his whole spirit is just like, been here, done this before. I know that I'm an elite level surfer, and I'm going to go out there and do my thing. And so it's cool. We haven't seen the same results as we've seen from the women's side yet, but it's early on. What do you think about this, Mitch?
I actually agree with with both of your opinions a lot. On the women's side, we really only have 3 real rookies. If you consider Teresa Bombolo an actual CT surfer, given that she did not qualify, but she's getting a wild card into the events. So if those points do count before the mid-year cut, there's a chance that she still has a chance to make it past that mid-year cut. But both Caitlin Simmers and Sophie McCulloch, to me, have really lived up to the hype. I mean, Sophie's only surfed in one event. She just barely lost out of making the semifinals, and Caitlin just won her first event. So I kind of expected them to do well this early on, especially knowing that a lot of the older females are probably going maybe not downhill, but they're not peaking as much as they did anymore. On the men's side, I knew Rio Waida was probably going to be my pick for Rookie of the Year. The other men are faring quite well. I agree with Gentile. A bit surprised that a couple of the other gentlemen haven't done as well, especially considering that Maxime Housineau has been around competing for such a long time. We haven't been able to see Ramsey compete yet. He's probably going to get the injured wild card.
That's a bummer. I'd love to see him surf again. And
especially,
we were robbed of Ramsey this season for sure.
Right, especially at Sunset Beach and the next 2 events. Like if he isn't able to surf at Bells and at Margaret, I really do think that those are 2 venues that would have suited him well. But either way, I think he's guaranteed a spot. At the back end of the year with the injury wild card. But I think they fared okay. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily surprised about the women's performances, but about the men, I didn't necessarily think that they were going to win an event this early on in the season. Question number 3, Dave. Our final one. This is from @TIU Cool for Megan. So the question is, do you think Katie is the new Kelly, winning super young?
Do I think Katie is the new Kelly? I mean, the surfing industrial complex drink. I mean, that's the question the surfing world's been asking for 30 years, right? Like, who's the next Kelly Slater? And we've probably heard it assigned to over a dozen people, right? Men and women. I'm trying to think. Like, Jeremy Flores would have been, Dane Reynolds at one point, like Steph Gilmore, right? And so, I mean, Kelly is so singular in what he's achieved in his career, and so it's hard to kind of say what part of this person is giving us the same feeling. Kelly was one, super young, of course, on tour. Katie has now 2. I mean, a lot of people have. I wasn't working when Kelly kind of started moving into the limelight, but getting to work with him as I have over the course of the last few decades and just observing how he was like before that, he kind of seems like someone who fed on the limelight and fed on the attention and wanted to perform for people. And I don't know Katie that well, and she's obviously very capable of performing in front of people, but I wouldn't say that at her age right now, she's looking for the limelight. I don't know. What do you think, Mitch?
Well, first of all, how old were you when Kelly actually won his first world championship in '92?
I was 9.
I wasn't even born. I was born 2 years later.
Exactly. I wasn't. Yeah. I wasn't surfing. That's for sure. So.
Well, look. Let me put it this way: there's never going to be another Kelly Slater. First of all, like it's just no, it's impossible. The guy's been on the championship tour for 3 different decades. He's surfed against at least 4 different generations of surfers. He's beating, people that he surfed against their sons. That's crazy. There's never going to be another Kelly Slater. I think what Katie does though is, I think she's unique. First of all, I think she's a real breath of fresh air. I think she's something that we need to see in the sport of surfing, especially when it comes to the competition side, because a lot of surfers, and I can even attest to this, sometimes we're just a little too cool, Dave. Oh, competing. It's like,
Right.
no. It's like, no, dude. Like, competing makes us better. Like, we motivate each other. We're pushing each other and stuff like that. And I think Katie brings the best of both worlds. She brings a free surfer's personality, but a competitive mindset when it comes to actually doing these events. Because I don't know if you saw the broadcast yesterday, but when AJ was actually reporting on whether or not Katie would give her a word before she paddled out for the final, she's like, no, like, I'm in my mode. Get away from me. So I like to see that.
Yeah.
And she's only 17. So I don't necessarily think she's a new Kelly. I think she's Katie Simmers. And I love to see that.
I love it. I love the answer. Super fun catch up as far as bonus episodes go, as far as any episodes go. Mitch, really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We will be back on Tuesday with another episode, and we'll bring Mitch back as soon as we can seduce him to come back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me again, Dave. Appreciate it.